Welcome to the Team Teach podcast. I'm Claire, and in each episode you'll find me talking with an expert guest to learn more about behaviour. We squeeze a lot into each episode. You'll listen to the latest thinking in behaviour, continue your professional development with our book recommendation, and then I'll send you away with 3 practical tips you can use in your setting. I'm joined today by Dave Smallwood. Dave is a Principal Team Teach trainer and Company Director of SENse Training and Consultancy. He's worked in special schools for both the local authority and for the National Autistic Society. As a staff development coordinator for the National Autistic Society, he's also delivered and developed training in autism, equality, diversity and rights. Dave is also an occasional co-host of the Team Teach podcast. And today, Dave and I are talking about anxiety and transitions into the early years foundation stage. Enjoy the episode. Hi, Dave. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you, Claire. How are you?
I'm really well. I'm a little bit upset this morning because we logged on and I've noticed that you've bought the same glasses as me. So now we are co-hosts with matching glasses.
Oh, but they're fabulous glasses though, aren't they?
Yeah, that's why you chose them. So today we're talking about a really tricky transition and anxiety for children starting the early years foundation stage at school. We're going to talk, I think, a bit about the anxiety that children might have with this transition, but also talk about parents, carers and their anxiety as well. As we usually do, we're going to start off with our reflective question: what you wish you knew then that you know now about the topic.
Is it directed towards me to start?
Well, who else am I directing it to?
Well, I just thought you might start talking yourself. I will go.
It's not rhetorical.
My thing is, I wish I'd realised at the time what kind of impact it has on parents and their anxieties moving into early years. 'Cause it's huge. It's a huge step for parents. We put a lot of emphasis on the children. I know you're going to talk about the children, and we should talk about the children. But parents, it's quite a difficult thing, isn't it, to hand your child over to someone and then trust them with your loved one. It's a really difficult one. So it's the parents that really I keep in mind, especially those parents that may have other difficulties as well. Say possibly a child with SEN, or maybe their family that have English as a second language, and culturally they might not understand everything and might not be well educated in our systems, and that's got to have an impact as well. And it's building those relationships with those individuals and those hard to reach parents as well, I think is really important.
Oh, that's such a great point, Dave. I didn't think of that when we were planning the episode, that there are many factors outside of school in the family that can influence how that transition feels and how much it is anxiety provoking. So that, I think that's a really interesting perspective. I suppose my one is I have worked in the early years foundation stage. And I think when I first started working there, I really didn't take on board or didn't quite get just how big that transition is. I think transitions across schools and into different services is tricky anyway, but that's a big one. The first time that those little ones are kind of potentially leaving parents and carers at home, I don't know. I just didn't twig, I think, earlier on in my career that was so big. And I'm glad that I know that now. And I think that, lots of other people are. And I think when we were planning for this, Dave, we kind of talked off air. There's so much great stuff going on in schools already at the moment, so much amazing practice. So I suppose hopefully what we can do in this podcast episode is let people know what a great job that they're doing and hopefully give a few nuggets extra as well.
Yeah, well, I certainly do my best to give some nuggets, but you're right. There's some fabulous work going on out there. It's quite refreshing, really. It's amazing. I was in a lovely, lovely school yesterday in West London, infant school, and it was just fabulous. Just listening to them talk, it was just amazing. So it's good. It's good to have that experience yesterday to bring to the podcast today, because it's really
It's fresh.
revitalize me. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe for once you will give some nuggets on the podcast, so and not just make us run over time. Um, so I guess I'm thinking as a good starting point, we're really focusing on the anxiety element and how that might spill out in behaviors. So should we start there and think about how some children, when they transition to the early years foundation stage, how they might become quite anxious, what that might look like?
Yeah. Well, there's the one that everybody will see, of course, the clinging to the parents and
Yeah.
not letting go, crying, lots and lots of tears, maybe withdrawing, becoming very quiet.
Mm.
Um, uh, yeah, some just love it and flourish and just come straight in. Want to get into everything, but then have difficulties with the sharing, and
Mhm.
that can be a big one, can't it? Lashing out or taking things off people, running away. So they're some of the behaviors that I've certainly seen.
Yeah, I think it's pretty synonymous across services that those things pop up. And as soon as you were saying, the classic, the child clinging on, I was like, yeah, different variants of that. And I know we're laughing because it's such a kind of stereotype, isn't it? But it can be so distressing for the child to kind of leave the parent carer, and it's really hard, I think, for the teachers and support staff as well, because, you know, physically kind of dragging someone off a parent carer, isn't what you're paid to do. And it's about using all of our skills and planning to try and encourage that child kind of into our care. And that's really tricky. And I think when I run training sessions for Team Teach, particularly for early years services, those kind of questions come up. Should I be, taking a child from a parent carer that's kind of clinging on because they're so anxious? And I think I always answer those in the same way that I would with any, kind of tricky question like that. But it's about trying to get the child in a position, I don't mean physically, I mean emotionally, where it's good to come in. Because if we're physically, trying to get children over the threshold so
Just
unwillingly, I
it's
think
just
that can be
more
tricky.
yeah, more trauma inducing possibly. And it's
Yeah.
those strategies that we can have beforehand, like I
Hmm.
say, to get them emotionally ready, and the transition strategies that we might have in place, building relationships, having familiar faces so that they feel safe before they start.
Hmm.
But you are still going to get it, and those
Yeah.
instances
I
are going
know,
to.
because I'm now counterpointing what I've just said, because I thought you might, but I'll counterpoint it myself. But
Sorry.
sometimes I don't know why I just don't. I could just do the podcast talking to myself, Dave, couldn't I?
How do you?
um,
I can. Do you want me to counterpoint it?
no, I don't want you to. But I don't want individuals to think that I'm, judging anyone where you do have a screaming child going into the early years, because actually when children avoid school, we know from previous podcasts that I've recorded around emotional based school avoidance, that actually if children get into the habit of avoiding something, it then becomes a pattern, and then it's really difficult to get them in. So we definitely don't want to perpetuate that cycle. So I mean, I'm doing a mime on a podcast which never works, but it's like balancing scales, isn't it, of kind of trying to get them through the threshold in the kindest, most supportive, encouraging way, but also not trying to get into a cycle of refusal, because then that's really tricky to break, and we kind of know that.
Yeah, yeah. So we are going to have to do it sometimes, aren't we? We are going to have to go through that threshold. Um, and it's a question I always get asked on Team Teach courses. Well, no, sorry, let me rephrase it. The question that I ask on Team Teach courses is why are we seeing these behaviors? And often the uh, answer I get back is parents or home.
Mhm.
And it's not always a answer that I'm comfortable with. Um,
No.
because parents, it's hard for parents, and they have that emotional attachment to their loved ones, don't they? They do, and it's going to be difficult. But sometimes we do need to look at the parents, and be quite, I don't know, it's firm, I'll say firm. And we do say, don't we, just leave them, they'll be all right. Just leave them, they'll be fine in 5 minutes. And it's encouraging the parents to go. But I remember a situation, and there was a young lady. We couldn't get her to access the class first thing. It was very traumatic and very difficult for her to leave her mum. Um, and what used to happen is we'd have to take her to a different room, and her mum knew where that was. So inevitably, her mum's head would pop up at the window, and you used to see her mum's head popping up at the window.
Oh,
Um, and that's it's so difficult. Like being a parent myself, it's different. You want to be there. You want to be there to support your child. You want to be there for every aspect of their life. But it's those things. Sometimes we just need to let go. And but it's difficult putting that across to parents, and that's what we've got to do as professionals, isn't it? They are going to be fine in 5 minutes. How can we evidence that and show that to the parents, just to make them feel a little bit easier about what's going on, maybe?
yeah, that it's a two-way thing, isn't it? It's the idea that we're trying to encourage parents and carers to trust practitioners, trust the school, that we've got this, we've got your child, we'll keep them safe, we'll nurture them. But also for practitioners to trust that the parent carer does know the child best and is the expert in the child and their needs. And I think sometimes that's the two-way communication and trust that sometimes doesn't quite work out the way that I would like in some of the services that I work in. So if we did, for example, have a child in that early years transition that was really struggling to get in, was really distressed, what I wouldn't want to happen, whether I was a practitioner or a parent carer, is that the school go, okay, we're going to, we're going to do it like this. We know best. What we really want is that dual dialogue where we're finding out from the parents carers, like, what works, do you think this will work? And then we're doing it collaboratively, because I think if we're taking as practitioners this kind of expert on the child, we don't, they're new to our services in early years often, and actually the parents and carers are such a wealth of knowledge, and there might just be a nugget that we get from them that's going to be that getting them through the threshold with much less anxiety. So I think that two-way communication. And I was also thinking, prepping for this podcast, about that initial parental involvement. And I know, I'm probably teaching people listening to, suck eggs, that work in the early years foundation stage, but those transitions that aren't just for the children, are they? That parental involvement way before the child starts the early years foundation stage is so important, isn't it? Because the parents then get to see where their child's going. We're almost like nourishing the parental and carers kind of anxiety as well. So I think that pre-planning makes a huge difference, and that can relieve anxiety, I think, for the child and for the parents and carers.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I think that two-way communication is important, and that gets parents on board. I think what we want to be careful of, though, is getting parents too involved and bringing them into class to show us, okay, well, can you come in and show? We do have to have that boundary set, don't we, sometimes? But you're right, it's about the support that we give to the parents, and that openness. And yeah, we'll try things that you think will work because they are new to us. Um, and I don't know, I don't often concentrate on parents too much, but I feel I am now during this podcast.
Did you know that you can become a trainer and deliver Team Teach training to staff within your own organisation? Have the flexibility to choose when, where and who you deliver your training to throughout the year. Find out more about this cost-effective option on the Team Teach website.
I mean, the children, when they come into early years, I mean, we say it, don't they? They're like sponges. They will flourish. It's great, and the work that the schools are doing is brilliant. And we know that they're going to mostly do fine. I think the people that have that difficulty with flexibility of thought with this in this situation is the parents. They're quite rigid in the way they're thinking. So we've got to be open to that. It's not that parents are being awkward. it's that parents have just got a huge emotional bond with their children.
Yeah, and this might be the first time for those length of periods that a parent carer has left their child. And then on the other side, we've got a bunch of children being shoved into quite a small space often, to play nicely together, but probably haven't yet got the skills to play nicely, to share all those things that you mentioned earlier, Dave. So that is going to be hugely anxiety provoking. However, a rich time for children to learn through role modeling of the practitioners in the room. And actually, as I was just thinking, if we have got children that have really struggled with that early anxiety of being left, what a great learning tool to be successful in being left and reducing and looking after their anxiety. Because the goal with anxiety isn't to take it away. Anxiety will exist in our lives no matter what, but it's for the child to be able to cope with those anxious feelings. And what a success that is if we can support that child through that process and they learn some resilience in their social emotional learning, right there, right at the start. So I think like that's so exciting for the early years foundation stage, that it is an opportunity. And I also think that it's about not rushing things. Because I think, I mean, I do this in my service sometimes. You want it to be like fixed and okay straight away. It just might take time. You mentioned individuals that might have SEN, and it might just take a bit of time. It's going to take a bit of time to get a diagnosis, certainly, as part of the school system, but it's okay. And we'll get there. It's that kind of mindset, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just with those children that may get a diagnosis or have got a diagnosis. You are going to see certain types of behaviors. I mean, some of them 3, 4, 5 years old, and they're babies, really. Sometimes we do want to rush it a little bit, but developmentally, we're going to get grabby behaviors, biting, and fallings out. It's going to happen, isn't it? I
Yeah.
do hear it sometimes in early years. He's having real difficulties at the moment with sharing with his friends. Well, yeah, he's going to. And yes, we want to teach them. We want to teach them the appropriate ways of behaving, and we will. But we just got to give that little bit of time, haven't we?
Yeah, that skills building and skills deficit that the children, are coming from. They certainly won't necessarily have developed those skills at home, so they're not necessarily going to be there at school yet. And it's always a yet, isn't it? It's just children will develop at different times those skills.
Absolutely, yeah. They will eventually. I'm sure they will.
They'll get there eventually one day. I do remember one of my nieces, I won't name her because if she listened, she'd get embarrassed. But from the age of 3 up until about 6, she was the clinger on her, the crier, just at being left, but and she has no needs that we're aware of, and she just found that transition really tricky. But the school were great, and she was allowed to bring something from home, so a transitional object, which I'm sure loads of early years foundation stages already do. And I think it was a bunny rabbit from memory that she was allowed way past kind of what would be the usual kind of use of a transitional object. She was just allowed it, and it was just part of her plan that she would have that, and that could encourage her to get off from my sister and get her bottom on the seat or on the carpet in school.
Yeah.
So it can affect everyone, right?
It can, and I think they're really good. If we can allow children to have that little bit, we can release the cord a little bit and give them a little bit of freedom and happiness, because that's what they need. That's what early years is about, isn't it? Really,
It is, yeah.
But like yesterday, I was talking at this school yesterday, that I mentioned earlier, and they were brilliant. And we were talking about sensory needs and how we might support people with sensory needs. And one of the suggestions was at lunchtime, they allow one of the boys to stand up while he's eating his lunch, whilst everyone else is. And that everyone was so happy about that. It was just, yep, that's what he does. So I asked him the question that I usually get asked. how does that affect the rest of them? Do you not then have the whole of early years all wanting to stand up whilst eating their lunch? And the answer from the school was no. The other children just understand that that's the way it is, and we've never had an issue with it, because they've created that culture where everybody, it's a full, like, an inclusive culture, and the way it should be. Everybody understands, not just the members of staff, but the children as well, that this is what this individual needs, and that's what he has. And I know if I needed it, then they'd probably let me do it as well, but I don't need it. So they don't have that cascade effect where everybody's wanting what everybody else has got. They've just created a really good culture, and I think that as well.
It's so amazing when we can get that inclusive culture, because it just supports everyone, doesn't it? And I think, oh yeah, that sounds so amazing. Dave, I've looked at my watch. I'm on it today. This is quite rare, because normally I'm like, I always think, oh, it'll be a quick episode. But actually, I really enjoyed this topic. I think there's more to say. But let's finish off with our top tips. Maybe you go first with yours. Just one, though.
Yeah, building relationships with parents, I think, is really, really important. Certainly where I worked, and I know it was a different type of setting, the last reception class that I had, but the home visits that I did had a massive impact on all of us, me included. But I know we can't always do home visits with everybody, but making sure that we have those opportunities to build trust, build relationships, build familiarity. So the transition strategies that you might have in place beforehand, they're really, really important, not just for the children. They're resilient and they'll be fine, I'm sure, but for the parents, that's my top tip.
That's brilliant. My one is around social emotional support. So once we have our children kind of in the early years foundation stage all set up, it's about just trying to help children to feel just so settled. And I know that practitioners do this already, but I just think that's so important. Trying to cultivate friendships, sharing, all of those things, a nice calm space, but just having that social emotional support for those children that are struggling, or even indeed those ones that aren't struggling, just to make sure that we can develop that confidence to be in service, and that will keep cultivating and growing, I think.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I've got another one. Just, can I have a quick one? Can I?
I mean, there is three, so I don't have another one, so I'm so glad you can have this quick one.
I don't even know if it's a top tip. Well, I suppose it is. What I just want to say is, on this podcast, I believe that we have successfully not reinvented the wheel.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
the practice that's out there for early years is fantastic, and it's brilliant. But if you're in a setting that's struggling, make links with someone else and go and see their practice.
Right.
There's some wonderful practice out there.
Yeah.
So go and visit someone else and see how they do it. There you go.
Yeah, no, I love that, Dave. It's so true. And we can learn from each other. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. And as you said, we definitely haven't in this episode. But I think, for those listening, we might have just highlighted a few points that, maybe there's some extra things that you might think about. And I think in particular, when we're thinking about parents, carers, and switching on empathy and understanding, that certainly is a helpful reminder, I know, for me as a practitioner as well. Well, we've done it, Dave. 21 minutes this episode. So, now I'm extending it by saying that. But thank you so much for your time. I enjoyed it as always. And sorry, I was a bit mean to you earlier.
You're always mean to me, Claire. I'm used to it now. But thank you very much. It's been a pleasure as always. Take care.
You've been listening to the Team Teach podcast. It's been great to have you here with us as we discuss behaviour, communication, and the ways we can best support those in our care. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.